Good afternoon. I am Professor Timothy Kentop, and this is CSC 235.
Can you
ACS,
hear me, Mr. Kanto?
yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good
Victor,
afternoon.
this is Victor, right?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay, glad you could join us. All right, so can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right, so the first thing I'd like to do is cue you into some changes on the Blackboard site. I want you to notice that we've changed one of the titles just a bit. Module 1 content hasn't changed, but we've we have restructured or reorganized some of the content. So our first module was about virtual machine or virtual system basics and builds, you know, what a virtual system is and how to create one basically. Everybody with me so far?
Yes.
Okay, good. Module 2 is about configuration and settings and then maintenance, right? So basically, if you configure and maintain, I don't like the way this renders here. This seems to be a little strange here. We're just going to say config maintain. So the second module is about configuration and maintenance of the virtual system, right? So in a nutshell, if you understand the settings for both the application, the VirtualBox application, and for the virtual systems themselves, so there's two levels of settings that two levels of configuration that you need to work in order to maintain your virtual systems. One has to do with the application, VirtualBox itself, and the other one has to do with the actual virtual systems that are running within VirtualBox. So you have two levels of settings, and then much of the stability, the reliability and security of a virtual system depends on updates and maintenance. So that's what we're going to be talking about. In this section, we'll review those concepts and methods. And then once you have the means to work with settings and with configurations and with software updates and maintenance, you have the means to resolve problems where an issue arising from a poor setting or a poor update, we can basically do some simple troubleshooting. So that's the goal of the second module. In the third module, the main focus is really going to be about the operating systems. There's different operating systems that you can use in virtual machines, and we want you to become familiar and comfortable with each of them, especially Linux. We want you to know how to work your way around in Linux. And in Linux, it's a very different environment than inside a Windows machine, but you see a lot of technology is based on Linux. How many of you know, well, how many of you use Android phones?
In my case, an Android tablet
Yes, an Android tablet.
is yeah.
And the Android operating system is a version of Linux. And it's not very hard to operate, but it does operate in a different manner than what we're used to with Macs or Windows. And in order to work with different operating systems, you're going to take turns configuring and building and rebuilding different operating systems. You're going to have to specify the hardware minimums. So each operating system has certain hardware minimum requirements. And so that's part of our scope of review in Module 3. And then in Module 4, we're going to be doing more with networking. Now, we will talk about networking today, but we're going to do a lot more with it in Module 4. And that's because connectivity has a lot to do with what kinds of software or applications you can install and how you use your virtual machine. So once we get past this level with the hardware and the OS, we're going to spend a lot more time in networks and with software. we do want to cover just a bit here. So any questions about what we're doing the rest of the season and what we're doing in Module 2?
No
Going-
question.
No questions, okay. So our initial learning outcomes, this will be developed a little further by next Monday, but the first thing we're going to do is to identify where to find and describe how to use settings for VirtualBox and for any of the virtual machines created or used with it. That's going to be our primary objective today. As a part of that process, we're going to work with and encounter indicators. And using the virtual machine or virtual system indicators, determine the status of the virtual machine operation and the component functionality. You'll see what I mean about that in a minute. And then in our class on Monday, we'll be going into things like snapshots and updates and maintenance and that kind of thing. But today we're going to focus on the settings, and then we're going to be dealing with maintenance on Monday. We hope to take the next module assessment very quickly by Wednesday of next week. So today, settings, Monday, maintenance and updates. Next Wednesday, you will have completed the solution and you'll be taking the next assessment. The reading assignments, you're going to read chapters 5 through 7 of the textbook, focusing mostly on chapter 5 between now and Monday. I'm going to assign specific, I want you to start glancing up the chapter 6 and 7 and look at some of the sections. In fact, I want to show you that right now. So this is a view of the Kindle ebook showing chapter 5. And as I said, there are status icons or indicators, right? That when a virtual machine is running, it'll tell you specific things about the components, their functionality, whether they're working or not, or they're disabled, or they're not even there. And then we go into menus and other settings here. In chapter 6, we are going to change a virtual network setting today. I'm going to show you how that works. I'm going to show you what you'll do for your solution. It's a very simple solution, but you'll change the basic configuration of the virtual machine network adapter, the network interface card. And we're going to save the rest of this stuff about what is an IP address and finding your IP address. We're going to save that for module 4. But in chapter 7, if you look in chapter 7, we are going to talk and review quickly about a feature called a snapshot. So when you're working with virtual machines, you can take a snapshot, you can record the activity on a virtual machine, you can take a snapshot, and then you can also clone or back up a virtual machine. You can export and import virtual machines. We're going to touch on those things briefly, but we're going to swing back around we're going to revisit these when it comes time to talk about network and applications in the other modules, because you can actually use the snapshots to roll back changes without having to go back and fix something in case it's broken. It's one of the cool things about virtual machines is that you can fix stuff. Everybody can see my screen, right? The textbook?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. All right then. So let's jump back to here, and then let's take this away. You may have the textbook, but I'm just going to take a moment to walk through some of this, right? So you have status icons. What do we mean by status icons? Can everyone see my screen here?
Yep.
Okay. So here we have a status icon across the bottom border of the running virtual machine that's out in the cloud. And you'll notice when I hold my pointer over it, a little pop-up provides some basic information. Shows me the file path to the disk, where the hard disk, virtual hard disk is stored, what type of controller is connected to it, and what port it's on the controller. I want you to notice the difference between this controller and this controller. What do you notice about the two of these here side by side? What's an obvious difference?
One is highlighted.
Yes, one is bright and highlighted. It's in the foreground. The other one is grayed. We call it grayed out. Typically, when a component is not active or it's not connected, it's grayed out. But this is a quick example of some of the status icons that we'll review by walking through chapter 5 today. I find them very useful because a lot of times you'd have to dig inside of a virtual machine to find the IP address. And if I do this, if I use ifconfig in Linux, then I have to sort through a bunch of stuff to try to find the IP address, where if I just do this, it tells me I'm connected. It tells me that what IP address I'm sitting on, and this is very useful. So I don't have to look up what command over here to try to get the inside information out of the Linux virtual system, and just hold my pointer over it. There's also one for video memory, and for the recording status, you see here that recording of the virtual machine is disabled. One thing you should know about recording is that it takes up an awful lot of disk space. This tells you something about the internals of the virtual machine and whether or not virtualization features are engaged. And then the last two icons, one of the things I think is most important to note is the host key. This one in particular is very important. So if I have, and I'm going to go full screen here. Let's pretend that I want to change the view of my virtual machine so that it's bigger and I have more display to work with, yes? One of the options I have for viewing changes, and this is a display setting, is to change the view so that we do something called scaled mode. And when I engage scaled mode, it's going to want to remind me about the host key and which key on my keyboard on my laptop will restore the view, because sometimes when you snap into a view, then you can't see anything behind it, meaning you cannot see the rest of your screen for your host machine. This is a Mac Mini. I'm running this virtual machine on a Mac computer, OS 10, right, OS X. And if I change the view a certain way on this virtual machine, I can actually blank out the rest of the Mac screen so badly that I can't get back to the Mac. And this is terrible, and this happens a lot. And that's where the settings can make a huge difference. One thing to understand is that there are key combinations that you press to regain control or put it back. Does anyone know what the universal key combination is for undo on most machines?
Control
Control what?
Z.
Control Z is correct. Yeah, the audio was choppy, but thank you for answering. Yes, Control Z is correct. Control Z usually takes the latest change that you applied and it puts it back. And so I'm going to try this today. I'm going to go to scaled mode. It's going to say, oh, you have to go to the left control button. In my case, because I'm accessing a Mac from a Windows machine, what it means by this clover leaf is the CTRL button on a Windows machine. Does everybody understand? And I want you to notice it's telling us that the host key, what the virtual system is going to call its host key, the host activation key, it's defined as the left control key. So if you look at your keyboard on your laptop right now, you'll notice you have a left CTRL key underneath the shift key, and you also have one on the right side near the right shift key. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. So I hold down that CTRL key, and that's my host key. And in this case, it's the left CTRL key. If I go ahead and forget that and press the right CTRL key and the letter C on my keyboard, it will not restore it. So I'm going to switch, and now you see this thing is in like a scaled mode, which means I can start messing with the size of the screen, and I get different effects. Sometimes it auto adjusts, and sometimes it just stretches out. And that's not the kind of setup that I want. What I'd really like is a display I can define. So I'm going to go into the display settings and see if setting these will make a difference. I'm going to set 1280 by 768 because that's a widescreen view that's similar to most laptop screens. And the key I need to press to engage this is off the screen. So it's very hard to make the change. So I'm going to go ahead again. I'll go full screen mode. Now it's saying I have to use the left control plus F to go back. So now I'm in trouble because I have a weird setting. And if I wait just a minute, of course, the display has adjusted. So now it's showing 1600 by 900. That's the full size screen of my laptop. And I don't really want to use that. And I'm not in scaled mode anymore. So if I want to go back, if I try to click on this to go back, it's not going to respond very well. I have to use the left control and F button to restore my view. And I may have an unresponsive screen because of the network connection at this point. So, but you see here, I'm able to pull up with my pointer my menu again. So I'm going to go back to scaled mode. And I'll say cancel. And what I really want to do is change this. Adjust the window size. So another option is the host key with A. This is the one that automatically resizes when you drag the screen size around. So auto resize the guest display, adjust window size. If I select this, I should be able to get more real estate where I can see my buttons. And here we go. Now I want you to notice what happened to my indicators. Do we have our indicators at the bottom of the screen anymore in this view?
Nope.
No, we don't. And one of the things I can do is make a change when I'm in the right mode and then count the number of stops with my keyboard, and then I can use my right arrow key or tab key until I think I'm going to hit apply. Sometimes you have to play with this a little bit to get it. But in any case, I have a more usable screen now, and that's helpful, except I don't have indicators and I have an unresponsive machine. So those indicators would really be helpful. I'm going to go back to scaled mode and hope that this takes. I'm in scaled mode, and I'm going to select auto resize. At some point, this should snap back in and I should get my border back and I should be able to see my indicators. Why don't we go ahead and review what's in the, are there any questions? There we go. Okay, so it snapped back down a bit, but I still don't have my indicators down here. So let's review in the textbook to see what the deal is with some of these indicator lights and how to turn them up and turn them off, okay? Any questions at this point?
No.
The important thing to remember is the reference about the CTRL key and what that means. The host key is usually the CTRL key, and it's the left side or the right side. And in order to get control again, let's try, was left control F. I'm going to try left control A. I'm going to try left control C. Yeah, it's kind of stuck. So it's actually a good thing that we're seeing some of these issues, so we can, there's auto resize and adjust window size. So you see that that's no longer checked, auto resize. So using some of those combinations has turned things on or off. If I press Control F, I should be able to cut that. Well, all right, so that didn't uncheck it. The other issue is that I'm doing this remotely across a web connection. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this screen. And one of the things I'm going to do for the rest of our session is use the local VirtualBox machine that I have. So I can demonstrate these things with the local machine, and then I don't have those control issues across a virtual private network, across a remote connection. All right, so in settings, when we access the settings here, after selecting a machine, we're actually accessing the settings we can change for the given machine, the virtual machine. And you see here that this isn't running. So one of the indicators here is showing it's not running. Neither one of these are actually running. But whenever you're accessing settings, it's usually centered on a machine. When you select preferences, in most cases, you're configuring settings that affect all of the virtual machines. These are VirtualBox settings, not machine settings. So the key to remember is that preferences have to do with the VirtualBox configuration, and settings have to do with the machine, the virtual machine or virtual systems settings. Does everybody understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. So in the first part of your chapter, it talks about all the different status lights. So a lot of times if you're having problems, one of the biggest problems that people have when they're working with a virtual machine is that they love what they can do with their virtual machine, but they can't get the files on and off of it. And one of the first tasks that we use one of the first tasks that we perform on a virtual machine is to try to get a thumb drive to connect, except that I have a physical machine, a host machine, and I plug the USB drive into the physical machine, into the host machine, my own hardware, and it may or may not connect on this level inside the virtual machine so that you see the USB attached. And there are other ways to share files. There's a shared folder option, but here you see the main indicators in the lower right corner, and here, instead of the left CTRL key, it's the right CTRL key. That's the home key. So that's really important. You always want to take your cues and see, are we dealing with the left one or the right one? Control key, I mean. You'll notice here it talked about mouse pointer status and host keyboard status. When I was clicking into the window remotely and I couldn't get my mouse to click and I couldn't get my keyboard presses to connect with the virtual machine, these two indicators would likely have shown that, oh, it's not capturing the mouse, it's not capturing my keyboard. So those indicators are really helpful. If your mouse or your keyboard become unresponsive, like the one we just saw, we would likely see those grayed out, or we would see a status change right there. So I want you to remember that the mouse and keyboard indicator lights are helpful when you're having problems like we just witnessed. In any case, I want you to know each of these indicators, and I want you to know what they mean and how they work. So hard disk shows your hard disk activity in the path on your computer. You know, obviously, if it's grayed out, you don't have. So you have an optical disk. That's like a DVD drive or a CD. If you don't have a DVD or a CD in your tray, what they mean is if you don't have an ISO file mounted inside there, then it's going to be grayed out instead of holding something. We're going to see how that works in just a minute. We're actually going to put a disk in the tray so you can see how it looks and how that status changes. In fact, maybe I should do that now. I'm going to go ahead and start. Well, let's look at my settings here for my storage. So notice I have an empty tray, yes? There's no image file in there. Let me see if I have an image file in here. Downloads. I have an ISO. Oh yeah. Yeah, I have two that I can put in here. So I want to find out where this is. I'm going to open the file location, and it's in Downloads Other. It's at the top here. So that's just a nice reference I'm gonna use. I'm going to go ahead and start my machine up and leave this tray empty, but then I'll go ahead and load one of these disk files. An ISO or image file is a disk file. It's like a virtual optical disk, a CD or a DVD. And I'll go ahead and do that. This one is a special one. And this one is really important in terms of settings and maintenance. So you have VirtualBox Guest Editions. It's a special disk that you insert into the optical disk drive, and then that allows you to load the guest editions into your virtual machine so that a lot of the hardware behaves better. We'll explain more in just a minute. I'm going to go ahead and cancel this and then start my machine. One of the setting changes that you can use for start, you can use a normal start and just run your machine. You can do a headless start. Does anyone know what the term headless means? Would anyone volunteer?
No.
Okay.
Not
So right now we have a screen and a keyboard and a mouse connected to our systems. That's what's referred to as the head, the console. So the keyboard and the screen and the mouse are like the starting point for your system, your physical system. But when you're working with a machine that's headless, it doesn't have a screen, it doesn't have a keyboard, it doesn't have a mouse. You access it remotely, but you don't have keyboard, mouse, and screen. There are cases where you want to use a headless virtual machine because you don't want people interacting with it, and you're the only one that you want to remotely access that. It's a good security measure. Detachable start means you're going to run the virtual machine, and then if I log off, if I sign out, that virtual machine keeps running. What am I saying? If I have applications running right now, and I do, like if I open up Calculator and I go ahead and run Calculator, and I don't close it, but I sign out, it's going to say, hey, you have all these applications running. When you sign out, it's going to turn them off. It's going to close them. Are you sure you want to do this? Has anyone ever seen a screen like that? Anyone? No? Maybe? Yes?
No,
Okay.
no, I haven't.
Okay. Well, if I log out right now, what's going to happen is that it's going to close the connection. We're going to lose our Zoom session. It's going to close everything that's open. It's going to close my web browser with a remote screen, all this. But if I start my machine detached, it means I can sign out and this virtual machine is going to keep right on running in the background. So signing out doesn't stop the running virtual machine. And that's very useful because sometimes you want a virtual machine to run all the time. How many of you are familiar with ads when you go into YouTube? You're trying to watch a video and you want to watch a video and all these ads pop up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, true. Annoying.
It is. There's a
Not you, not you.
virtual machine you can run, and you can run something called Pi-hole. And it imitates the function of a Raspberry Pi, which is a small machine, a small actual physical machine, the size of a credit card. It costs $35. But this Pi-hole virtual system basically takes all of your data coming and going from YouTube, and it filters out the ads. It makes your internet a lot faster. The only problem is that if you sign out of your computer screen, it stops working. So it would be a great example. That would be a great example of one case where you would want a machine, a virtual machine running all the time, even if you signed out or didn't sign out. Okay, so if you look right now, I've maximized my screen, and down here are the indicator lights, right? So I have no USB attached. It shows that my network is active. You can actually see it blinking. Can everybody see my network blinking? And can
Yeah.
everyone see the hard disk blinking? Barely, the little red flashy. Can you see? Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah, we seen it.
Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to enter this machine by using the keyboard option. So this is one of the settings. I want to be able to use my mouse to enter some keyboard combination. I can use a soft keyboard and start clicking, but it's hard to do a Control-Alt-Delete simultaneously with one mouse pointer. So this is where I go. This is the setting that I use to enter my keyboard. I'm going to Control-Alt-Delete. It's going to give me my login. And when I log in, here's one of the problems that I have. I have a very nice laptop, but my virtual machine can't use my laptop screen, not all of it. I want to insert, I'm going to go to the devices menu, and I want you to notice here it gives me an option to insert the VirtualBox Guest Editions ISO. So I'm doing that now, and I want you to look at what's happened down here. What was gray is now highlighted in light blue. Everybody see this?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's turned up, and what I want to do now is insert the disk. And when I insert the disk, I should get a screen pop up. I'm going to go ahead and close this for now. Because I'm using server, okay, here we go. So I inserted the disk, and now it's asking, what do I want to do with this? I want to run this. I'm going to say run this. This allows me to configure a wider range of setting options for my virtual devices because this provides better virtual drivers. So the software that makes a hardware device work is called a driver, a software driver, a hardware driver. And it's a software program that interfaces with the physical hardware component. And what I want to do is install guest editions inside my virtual machine. Now, the really sticky part is that we're used to running out online and finding out, why can't I do my display? Why doesn't my sound card work? How come I can't plug in my printer with a USB cord in my virtual machine? And it says, oh, you have to install guest editions. The problem with that is so often when we try to install guest editions, it's not even available. You have to install what's called the extension pack. So along with, did we cover this before in module 1? Anyone? Anyone remember us talking about?
I think we did, yes.
Yeah, we did the extension pack.
Okay, so when you go to download, you don't have the option of guest editions inside the virtual machine. Because what you have to install first are the extensions. It's called the extension pack. So when you download the extension pack, now you have the guest editions disk. Until you download the extension pack to install as an add-on for the VirtualBox software, you won't have that, that option, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say next, and I'm going to accept the default installation. And if you have not done this with your server virtual machine already, I want you to do it before you go ahead with your assignments and activities for this module. I'm going to click install, and then it loads all of the virtual hardware component drivers into my virtual machine. And that's going to make a lot of my hardware components function much better. It's important to understand that when you update, let's say let's see. If we check for updates to do maintenance on our VirtualBox Manager, and it says, oh, you have a new update, instead of saying you're already running the most recent version, let's pretend it says, oh, you have a new update. If you have to shut off all your virtual machines gracefully, then you have to basically get the the update, and it's going to install, it's going to uninstall your previous version and install a new version. What happens is that now your VirtualBox is on a certain version. Now you have VirtualBox 6.1.14, except your guest editions are not. Your guest editions inside the machine, if you go inside your virtual machine, what happened to my virtual machine? I'm running. Oh, there it is. Okay, so what will happen is that everybody sees 6.1.14 right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what happens is that people update the VirtualBox, but they forget to update the VirtualBox extension pack, which then updates the guest editions. And then they forget to run the guest editions again, to insert, to go to the optical drive and choose a disk image, and then to go to the devices option again and insert the disk into the disk drive. So you want to select what you're going to insert, and then you insert it. Then you want to select the option when it pops up, what to do with it. I want to run it. The other thing they do is if they're in a hurry, they close down their machine without rebooting, and it just hibernates the machine without actually restarting the machine. I want to reboot my machine. So that's one of the important things you need to do occasionally as a part of maintenance. And I know we said we were going to deal with maintenance more on Monday, but in order for most of your settings to work and in order for your features to function, those are the two pieces of maintenance you have to do before that. We'll be talking about much more elegant maintenance requirements on Monday, but sometimes settings don't work. Sometimes, and we've seen that. We went here, and we're here, and now I have something. I have a window, but I still don't have my indicator lights, so I'm having a hard time getting this stuff to work right. And that's frustrating. When your indicator lights and your settings are not functional, or they're not accessible, one of the first things you need to look at first is to check to see if you have guest editions up to date and the VirtualBox up to date. And that has to do with maintenance of the software and VirtualBox, and not so much maintenance of the virtual machine. But remember that unless you have it in hardware on your physical machine, you can't really do it in your virtual system. So starting point is to do it on your own system. So now I have indicators here. I want to see if I can get my other indicators back here. So let's look a little further in our book. So I hope everybody's read through chapter 5. I want you to continue reading through 6 and 7, but focus mostly on 5 for now. So network information shows you the IP address. We've already seen that. Attached USB drive. If it's grayed out, you don't have a USB attached. Shared folders. If you don't have those configured, it's grayed out. So how do you set up shared folders if they're grayed out? Well, let's look at our example here. Do I have a shared folder? Yes. I have a shared folder that's the temp drive of my physical laptop C drive, and I've shared that with this machine. So inside here, it's going to appear like a drive letter. What do I mean? I can't use a USB drive. Let's assume I can't connect a USB drive. It's not, there isn't one plugged in. I don't have one handy, but I still need to share files between my virtual machine and my physical host. So what do I do? Well, inside the machine settings here, you can turn on drag and drop, clipboard and drag and drop. What do I mean by that? I can take a file from here and I can drag and drop it into my virtual machine. If I have the shared clipboard and drag and drop enabled in bidirectional. So that's one way I can get files onto and off of there. But I also have the ability here with shared folders to specify a shared folder. And what I'd like to do, and notice here it says read only. It's going to automatically mount it and it's going to make it permanent. So on my laptop, I have my C drive and I have a temp folder. And I want to show you what's in my temp folder so I can make a believer out of you. Can everybody see this? Hello?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So I'm going to resize that so you can see this. I'm going to create a new text file called Punch Buggy. Something totally spontaneous. And I'm going to say, you forgot the Y. I'm going to save that. I'll close it. And that's on my local laptop hard drive. Within my server, if I look inside here, I have an extra drive. Inside my drive, it says temp. Does that look familiar? There's no Y. I open it up and it says you forgot the Y on the file name. So one of the ways that you can work with configuration issues to load drivers, to load guest additions, to get data and software in and out is to change the settings on your machine to allow shared folders. And you create a folder on your local machine, like the temp folder. And so that's C:\temp. And then within the machine settings, you set up your shared folder. You'll notice that the USB setting allows you to connect older style USB and then newer style USBs. A lot of times when your USB is plugged in and it won't be recognized by your virtual machine, in order for you to configure new software for your virtual machine so it plays nice and the features and functions work, sometimes you have to change the setting so that it's an older version like USB 1.1. So you would plug in your USB drive and then this would light up. It wouldn't be grayed out. And instead of leaving it the default value, if it wasn't working right, you could check this older version for more general support. That's usually helpful in getting printers to work. So printers that have a USB cable that can't connect to a virtual machine, it's often because it's using a newer standard and it's expecting a thumb drive. And the virtual device or virtual machine components, the hardware component drivers, are not up to date and there's a disconnect there. So let's talk quickly about network. On your machine, I want you to be able to connect with your virtual machine to have access to other updates and drivers. And in order to do that, you may need to connect your network. So what are we saying? You can drag and drop the install files you need. You can insert them with a disk. You can use a USB. You can set up shared folders, and you can also use the network. You may find that your machine doesn't connect to the internet. If you find that it doesn't connect to the internet, you change it from bridged to NAT. I want to demonstrate for you what this does. Right now, I want to find out whether or not my machine, my network setting for this machine will allow me to connect to the network. So I'm in bridged mode. What that means is that if I look at my internet settings, I should see and usually it's on my Ethernet. It says connected. Here you see I have a private internal address. So this is the device. This is going to look like, my virtual machine is going to look like a real machine on my wireless router in my home. So I'm sitting in my condo right now. This address was assigned by my wireless router. You want to find out if you can connect to the internet, so you're going to do this. But I want you to know that you're going to want to capture that screen. So the screen I just showed you, you can click on connected and then go into status. It's another way to do it. Ethernet, and connect this again and then scroll down. Everybody help me remember 168.1.116, right? So it's 168.1.116. If I change my machine setting, well, let's see if I'm on the internet first. So I'm going to start typing CMD because I want to go to my command prompt. I'll go ahead and pin this to the start because I'm going to use it a lot. I'm going to run this as administrator. Can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
So I'm going to ping 8.8.8.8, which is Google's DNS service. I can see it. So I'm getting a good ping back. That means that my bridged connector works. My bridged network connector to the internet on my virtual machine is connected. Now I know that anyway because down here it gave me all that in the first place. If I change it with my settings and I make it a NAT instead, it's going to turn my machine, instead of being just another machine on the network. Oh, by the way, if you ever see this, always answer no. What I'm going to do now is look at my network status again. And so Ethernet. Do I have the same network address now? Does anyone remember? What was the other address?
168.116.
Right. What do you see here? Is that the same one?
No.
No?
No, it's not. The network adapter on my virtual machine works like my wireless router. So it does NAT. I have a 10 dot something private internal. And then when I get outside, the 192.168.1.116 address connects to my wireless router. which is also doing NAT, I have a condition called double natting. I may be able to connect to the internet, but I have problems doing games. Let me see if I can repeat the same command and still connect. I can. One of your first assignments is to change your adapter between settings and do some basic tests to see if one or the other or both work. And if they do, you're going to issue ipconfig. Here you see this setting, right? I'm going to go ahead and change it back. Change it back to bridged. All of a sudden, it's going to flicker. I'm going to hit the up arrow key and type ipconfig again. And you see, I can work both. You're going to screenshot this. I can ping with either setting. I can use either private internal network address, depending on whether I do. Now, in your case, you may find out that when it doesn't work, you don't get a result. It times out. It says it's unreachable. And you might find out that you get some weirdness there. But that's going to be one of our first assignments. That's what we were going to cover for today. We just wanted to get started with some of the settings. So what I'd like to do is have you read the rest of this. Just remember that whenever you're dealing with indicators and settings, you're changing the components of the virtual system itself. When you're using preferences, you're changing the settings for the VirtualBox application on a higher level. And yeah. So saving your machine and shutting it down properly is a big deal. You want to go ahead and do that correctly. I'll go ahead and demonstrate. That'll be the last thing I demonstrate today. And then we'll close. So I'm going to, from inside here, I'm always going to try to shut down the machine from within inside the virtual machine using the normal method to shut it down. If I can't do that because my settings are off and my options are dysfunctional, I can go to machine and I can pause it, which puts it into sleep mode. I can reset the virtual machine, which takes it back before we did the guest editions installation. We don't want to do that. ACPI shutdown, it's like pressing the power button. So if I want VirtualBox to act like an avatar for me, when I choose ACPI shutdown, that's like VirtualBox's avatar for Professor Kentop walks over to this virtual machine and presses in the power button on the virtual machine, and it'll shut things down. In our case, we're going to go ahead and do it gracefully. So always try to shut down from within the virtual machine if you can. Only use the machine shutdown menu and ACPI if everything else fails. I'm going to say other planned. I'll say continue. And we're done for the day. Are there any questions about anything we've covered to this point?
Yeah. No question.
Okay.
No question.
I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and close the screen. And we will see you on Monday. Thank you for your time today. I'll put this recording out on the Blackboard in a day or so. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Have a good weekend.
You too. Good day.
All right.